Perfect. I love when the AI tells me that we're recording. That lets me know that we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so again, welcome. My name is Cheryl, and we are going to go over our agenda really quickly. We're going to have a welcome along with community norms, some introductions into the folks who created the guide. We're going to have a first look at the guide. It's super exciting. My colleague Joyce worked really hard along with Julia from Welcoming Neighbors Network. And then we're going to have a panel discussion followed by a Q&A and closing remarks. Before we move on to introductions, I just wanted to go over some community norms so that folks can just be respectful of the space. Stay on mute unless you're speaking. Remember to use the Zoom features like raise your hand, speak for yourself, use I statements, listen for understanding, not response, and ask questions in the chat. We will be answering questions later. This is only an hour time, and we have a lot to cover. So we are more than happy to stay additional 15 to 30 minutes after if people have lingering questions or thoughts or any feedback that you're willing to give. So, with that being said, I'm going to move on to introductions, um, and we'll kick it over to Joyce.
Cheryl, introductions meaning we're gonna.
Yes, so we'll kick it off to actually Jonathan to talk about Abundant Housing Massachusetts and how we were founded, what our membership model looks like, and yeah, Jonathan, take it away for us, please.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm not sure I'm prepped to talk about all of those details, but I'll give you the quick overview on Abundant Housing. So Abundant Housing was formed, actually we're celebrating our 5th anniversary this year. I joined back in 2020, so in the early days before we had any staff, coming out of the pandemic as one of the sort of early board members here. It's been really exciting to watch our growth. We're now up to 400 individual members, and we have 17 affiliate groups across Massachusetts. And I was really asked to kind of talk about some of the thinking and how we approached the idea of really needing to make sure that we built grassroots groups across communities in Massachusetts to advocate for pro-housing initiatives. So when Amma first came on the scene back in 2020, there were already a number of pro-housing groups across the state. Engine 6 in Newton, A Better Cambridge in Cambridge, that was founded by our founder, Jesse Kansan-Benenov. Somerville EMB, just as examples of different groups. And really, we came on the scene to kind of help build that statewide support network, both for the existing groups, but also to found new organizations across the Commonwealth. Really, I think in Massachusetts, more so than in many states across the country, decisions around zoning are really, really, really hyper-local. And we really have a blessing or a curse in town meeting in Massachusetts that really requires a strong pro-housing advocacy push to build bases of trust to get different reforms across what can be a very cumbersome, difficult town meeting process. So I think we've seen a number of communities the success of starting those local pro-housing groups. I think it's always better for folks to hear that pro-housing message and why it's important to support new housing in their communities from folks within their community. I think it's one thing to hear it from the town over, but we have strong local history in Massachusetts and all of our communities, and I think it's important for some folks to hear it from people within their own borders, why it's important for them, why it's important for their communities to be supportive of new housing. So really excited to see folks here today. I know I've learned a ton from folks at the Welcoming Neighbors Network just today on a webinar about messaging around pro-housing initiatives. So really excited to see everyone here today. Really excited to have folks eventually hopefully have the opportunity to work with some of the team at Abundant Housing. Cheryl, Joyce, Mike, who are on this call, are all sort of forces of nature in the Massachusetts pro-housing movement. Julia at Welcoming Neighbors Network has been doing some yeoman's work over there across the country in building this movement. So really exciting. I apologize for the hoarse voice. I've been talking a lot today and battling a cold, but yeah, really excited. Hopefully folks will learn a lot from this presentation, and I think I hit everything that I needed to hit. Joyce, Cheryl, I don't know if someone else can touch
Yeah.
on the membership structure, if you want to get into details on that. But I think that's the only thing I don't have in front of me.
Yeah, that's perfect. Definitely want to pass it over to Julia to talk about like how this webinar came to be from a national perspective, because we're seeing that the pro housing landscape is changing across the country, and how this guide kind of came into a workshop while we're here today. So kick it off to Julia.
Awesome. Thanks, Cheryl. And great to see everyone here. Again, Julia Beebe with the Welcoming Neighbors Network. For those not familiar, we're a national network of independent, local, and state pro-housing groups, including Abundant Housing Mass, who is one of our founding members and a wonderful leader in this space. So we're so excited to have this great turnout tonight and really wanted to recognize the two different groups on this call. We know there are many of you who are here who are really eager to start your own local pro-housing group to do local advocacy. And then we know there are others on this call, largely from the Welcoming Neighbors Network, who are in the process of building statewide umbrella organizations that can both lead legislative advocacy at the state level and provide support to local pro-housing organizations, including when there are urgent local policy opportunities at the municipal level. And for those groups, we believe there's just so much to learn from Abundant Housing Massachusetts and the model that they've built. So in addition to hearing from Abundant Housing Mass board and staff who are really supporting the statewide affiliate group model, we'll get to hear from Kobe and Beth about what that support has looked like for them concretely and what it has allowed them to do locally. And just a huge shout out to Joyce, who led the creation of this How to Start a Pro Housing Group guide. Very excited to have it for everyone in Massachusetts and everyone across the network nationally, because it's just a really important and accessible resource that emerging statewide organizations can use to support local groups. We know that as the number of local affiliates or member groups increases, that it will just be really important to have centralized resources, infrastructure, leadership development, and other support to make that work both more effective and sustainable over the long haul. So as Joyce is going through the guide now, I hope you can really imagine how you'll use this and all the materials linked in it to support the leadership of local groups in your state. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Joyce, I believe.
Great. And Cheryl, could you pull up the slideshow?
Yes, ma'am.
We have some screenshots from the guide. It's a 10-page guide, so really excited that we're launching it today. And it's definitely been a great process. So I hope people can see that the screen.
Give me 1 second. I think I have the share to have my face on there. I don't want that on there. So we're gonna do this way. There we go. Perfect. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Cheryl. So yes, this is a 10-page guide. It's almost a recipe book for how to start your own pro-housing group in your local community. You know, if you're tired of hearing all the no's at planning board meeting and feel like you're all alone in this, you're not. So this is an opportunity to go out and to organize and to have a pro-housing group that can take action in your local community. So if you could switch it to the next slide. And these are screenshots from the actual guide. And so it's 10 pages, but these are just little snapshots. But you'll see the template here. It's basically delineating 3 different stages. The first stage is finding people who support pro-housing and like-minded people in your community. And that is, we'll go further down in the guide, but the second stage is building community. Once you've found people, building community and starting to build the structure of your new local pro-housing group. And the third stage is go out there and change things in your community. So as you can see from this, everything is very much color coded. So everything that's in the first stage is going to be this kind of teal. I don't know. I don't always see colors, but it looks a little teal to me. The second stage is this green, and the third is orange. So let's move to the first stage on the second slide. So the first stage is, how do you find people? You know, you're going to hear from Kobe and Beth, and that was the question because they started out pretty much on their own. How do you find people in your local town? So the guide goes through maybe 8 or 9 ways to find people. Anything from tabling at events to doing one-on-ones to having workshops. We have a workshop, a storytelling workshop called A Place to Call Home. Connecting with ally groups, whether it's churches, social justice groups in churches, especially UU churches, it's great. Climate change, people who are interested in climate change activism. There's a lot of potential allies, and house parties. These are some of the avenues. Oh, another avenue, I hope I have enough time, internet sleuthing. You wouldn't believe this, but people make comments on Facebook. So one of our groups, Brookline for Everyone, started with 2 people noting the discussions on Facebook and other social media sites, and then personally connecting with pro-housing people in that way. And now, 3 or 4 years later, they're off and running with their own PAC, and they started out just on internet sleuthing. So if we could go to the next slide. I wanted to point out part of what's in the guide are links to other guides. So you can see in the corner, it says, see our tabling guide here. And when you click into that, then it can tell you everything you need to know about tabling, how to set up a table, what to do, any sort of information on doing that. We have another click and link into how to do one-on-ones. Later on, we have examples of mission statements and a brainstorming workshop on developing your mission. And there are other links in the document. So an important part of stage 1 is all this meeting people, but it's also tracking people. Every single person you want to talk to that you're talking to, put it down on a spreadsheet. Basic contact information, where you met them. I met them at Strawberry Stroll. I met them at the planning board meeting when they spoke. What activities they've done, and notes to jog your memory. So I met this person at this festival. They live in an ADU, they're an architect, any sort of notes. So the important thing that I want to stress on stage 1 is that stage 1 never stops. I'm sorry to tell you, stage 1 never stops. You're always going to want to meet people, bring in new advocates. This is an ongoing process. If you want to have a group that lasts and lasts and lasts, stage 1 is always a part of what you're going to do. So if we could go to the next slide. We're now in the green. We're now in stage 2, which is building community and structure. So in stage 1, you met a lot of people, and once you've found at least 4 to 5 people that are really, really interested and might be potential leaders, you're ready to start bringing them together in community. So we define community. So part of these gatherings initially for building community is to determine, what is your common vision? What are your common values? What's your vision for your town? What's your name? Sometimes that could take 3 or 4 meetings. What is your name? Mission statement, and building a group website. I also want to note that all of AMA's affiliate groups are all different. They're whatever that community feels. So some of our groups are, Beth and Kobe will go into this. Some of our groups are more housing focused and affordable, with a capital A, affordable housing. Others are larger vision. Kobe will talk about that as well. This is the importance of building community. So another important thing I want to note is people may come for the housing issue. They're interested in housing, but they stay for the community. They stay for the relationships. So if we could go to the next slide. So the first part of stage 2 is building community, building mission, name. But the second part of stage 2 is, what is your structure going to be? So Ama's definition of a group that, a real group that's working, is there are 4 to 5 leaders, regular leaders that meet at a regular time at least once a month. So during this stage, you're going to get into the nitty gritty of, what is your leadership structure? Who will chair? Who will take notes? I don't want to go into all of the particulars because it's in the guide. And how will your group make decisions? Will you run by consensus or majority of vote? So all of this is in the guide as well. And also, how will you communicate with people? How will you communicate with the leaders? How will you communicate with people who are just following you and interested in a bit in your work? So if we could move into the other slide, the next slide, that would be great. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, excellent. So this is the most important slide. This is the laddership leader of engagement. So you can see that there are the leaders that are in the middle. They're the people who are sort of taking the most responsibility for the structure and for the running of the organization. And then on the outside, there are people who are somewhat interested. They may sign up for your newsletter. They may do something here and there, but they're more on the periphery. And then there are emerging advocates who may sign up to do a tabling shift, or may go for a vote, you know, on your endorsed candidates. And then member advocates are a little bit more involved. They may run for town meeting. Instead of taking a shift, they may organize the tabling event. So it's always trying to get people to go to the next stage of leadership. And this is the most important thing, especially with this whole idea of running a group. Good leaders don't do it all. They cultivate new leaders. They bring people through this whole process. And it should be fluid, because leaders should be able to then take a step back if they need to move out of the leadership role. There are people to go into that. How am I doing on time, folks? Because I forgot to set my timer. So if someone could just let me know.
I think you have about like 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh my gosh. Okay, we're doing well. We're okay. So just an example of this, sort of this ladder of leadership. Someone came into the workshop, Your Voice Counts at City Hall. They were a little bit interested in housing, very interested in housing, had never had any advocacy experience. They turned up at that workshop. They were so inflamed and got so supported that they showed up at City Council. This was in Newton, Massachusetts. Anyway, within a year, they started a new pro-housing group in Newton, Newton for Everyone. So you can see how the ladder of leadership went. Now, we're always encouraging this person. You need to get other people to do the ladder of leadership, so that if you, for any reason, need to step out, there's someone always willing to take your place. So if we could go to the next slide. Taking action. So this isn't really a guide necessarily about taking action, but the point of this whole thing of building a group is to take action. So this is in order to make changes in your town and community. And a preview of what is in the guide here is everything from identifying your goals, tactic ideas of what you want to do. There is even a link to how to do power mapping, which is also a very important part of identifying ways to make changes in your community. So, wow, this was a 7-minute just going through the whole guide. And there may be questions about that, but I urge people, if they're interested, you need to wrestle with it. This was just a brief introduction, but we really want the guide to really come alive. So if we could switch to the next slide. Yes. And now we're hearing from Kobe and Beth. Kobe is a town councilor. Kobe is a town councilor from Franklin, Massachusetts, and he, like I, am a member of Strong Towns, and felt like he wasn't sure if there were other like-minded people wanting to get something together, and contacted Amma, can you help? And Beth is from Norwood, Massachusetts, and she has her own story of wanting to build a group and not sure if there were other people who would be interested. So I'm thrilled that they're both here with us today. And if we could put them both on camera. So we will. Great. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Joyce. There's Kobe. There he is.
Hi, Kobe. I'm so glad you're here because you can make this this guide come to life. I'm going to start asking a question. By the way, I feel like we developed a connection over the last couple of years, and I'm just really excited that you're here tonight. I'm just blown away with everything that you were able to accomplish in your towns, and I think it's a great example. I'm going to start with the first question to Beth. And Beth, what led you to reach out to Amma initially to form a pro-housing group?
Yeah, so the catalyst for reach out to Amma is a soap manufacturer, I guess. There's a chemical manufacturing plant about 2 blocks from my house that abuts the commuter rail station, and the owner wanted to get out of the business and sold the property to a developer, but it was not zoned for residential. And the blowback at town meeting was incredible, that people were up in arms about how could we put this building here. And it just blew my mind, and I realized that I needed help to figure out how to help manage us to get it passed, to get this zoning change passed. So I reached out to Abundant Housing, got a lot of support from the whole team. And then when it was Abundant Housing put out a call to say if people are want to seed their own groups and want a little extra support, I just jumped at the chance because I'd already received so much support from Abundant Housing. And so, yeah, so I got connected with Joyce, and we started really working on that project, ended up becoming part of this bigger zoning. So for the Massachusetts folks, it was the 3A zoning. For people who are out of state, it's basically a 133 communities. I think we need to upzone near our transit. So this property ended up being part of that. And so it just got folded up into how do we comply with this new zoning? How do I get people for neighbors instead of a chemical plant?
And you had a good victory there, but we'll talk about that later. And yes. So Kobe, this question is for you. What were the tactics? We went through the guide about the different tactics. What were the tactics you used to find other advocates and new leaders in Franklin? And how did you gather those leaders together to form a group? So the first part of the question is, what tactics, and then how did you bring them all together?
Yeah, so you underlined it. This is the most important part of putting a group together. It's the hardest part of putting a group together, and you're almost always going to start with, as you remind me, Joyce, with the mindset of, what if it's just me and there's no one else And so I think you laid out a few great options. The first and sort of always is going to still be the top pathway in my mind is one-on-ones. It's finding someone, like you said, on Facebook
Just put it out.
comments. It's finding people who are willing to say something at a public meeting, who have said something before. It's people who have, emailed me. I'm a town councilor in my community of Franklin. And so people had outreach because they had heard some of my comments. I would, table at the farmer's market and meet certain folks and just try to be systematic about naming any time. It was rare, but the times where someone did speak up something, pro housing or something that caught my ear as they're thinking more systematically about the future of development in Franklin. Had created a list and eventually was able to work with you and start reaching out one-on-one to some of those key folks. The other thing that turned out to be hugely successful is right at the beginning of us putting together our group, I had held a Jane Jacobs walk, which if you're not familiar is held in honor of the great thinker Jane Jacobs and community advocate. And around her birthday every year, different communities do a on the ground walk and talk about the community around them and how the design of the community impacts the feel of it. And so I had hosted one of those with a local journalist, and that ended up being the major way that we identified folks who wanted to opt in for that. And many of them didn't quite know what it was there for, but it was really an opportunity for us to start to talk about, hey, here are all these, hidden decisions that are underlying why Franklin feels the way that it does. And that ended up being a really strong start. And then finally, working with community partners that I knew already, including with the Interfaith Coalition. Your religious leaders are often going to be ready to help, and we had a few that wanted to help early. All of this led to, as Joyce had put in her notes, this dream, play, build exercise where we went to one of the churches, invited all our key folks, something like 30, 35 folks, and played with Legos. And Joyce took us through this interactive, 90-minute of shaping what your favorite memories of places are, what a great place means to you, breaking down what that means, having some responses and word clouds where we got to just have a conversation, not really with any mission, but have a conversation about what we want Franklin to look like. That then made it clear, hey, we got enough energy here and enough of a clear vision that we could start to move and put a group together. So just having that first exercise was really helpful. Since then, continuing to find leaders has still come through the same ways. The Jane's Walk continues to be a great recruiter, one-on-ones, and paying attention to people who comment on any Facebook post and reaching out to them, either myself or other members, continues to be helpful. And then we have in-town events, the Strawberry Stroll and the Harvest Festival. We have two downtown walking events where you're allowed to have a table as a community group. And so we make sure that we have a community group, a table at each of those events. And that's a great way for friends to have found us and just spark conversation. That's ended up being, perhaps our top recruitment tool, just in terms of numbers, getting people onto our email lists. So I think that was a lot of different ways that we've got the folks that we have. And we just passed 100 followers and on our page when just over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, Joyce and I were talking about how it might just be poor me in this town, and we quickly found lots of friends.
So exciting. I remember when we met and you took me out for ice cream and we thought it was just you, and now it's this huge thing and so many successes. So exciting. we have a lot of questions here, but I'm going to kind of condense it down because I know that there are questions out in the people who are here. Um, Kobe, how specifically has the AMA team, excuse me, helped you build your local group's autonomy and capacity? This may include specific trainings or resources or infrastructure or coaching. Um, so that's the question. I think there are people outside of Massachusetts that might want to start having this relationship with a larger statewide group. So just answering the question of what were the resources that were useful.
Yeah, the clearest, most useful was you, Joyce. Amma had this program where they were going to pair uh, potential startup groups with a regional organizer, and we got paired with Joyce, and Joyce was more than helpful from the very beginning in terms of how do we go from nothing to something. So we talked about the Dream Play build, but even those first few meetings, putting agendas together, talking through activity options. What does it mean to be an organization? Right, we're going to need a website. Right, we're going to need a mission statement. And keeping us organized in those first few meetings, following up. We would select moderators for each, but Joyce would reach out and work with the moderators to make sure that we were using everyone's time efficiently, and really helping with recruiting, making sure that I sat down and did what I said of identifying those folks and following up and reaching out to them directly. And then, throughout has continued to provide, emotional support and connections with other municipalities, which has been very helpful. The other ways that AMA's helped, I was an AMA member, well before we got involved with Ben for Franklin and starting our group. AMA has been fantastic for me personally, and now more of the Ben members, mostly as a networking space. By going to events, I get to meet other leaders and advocates from around the state, sometimes in state, sometimes out of state, and that's always helpful for picking up good ideas, making relationships, and if nothing else, getting some energy to keep moving forward. AMA did specifically help us around funding and providing a speaker for our launch event, which made for a very successful launch event. And then the final way is all the resources that they provide us on the website and through email and through Joyce to keep us up to date on state and local news. So either what other municipalities are doing or anything that's going to affect us from the state level and navigating all the changes that we've had in Massachusetts.
I love that. Yeah, I really love the idea of we're a community. So I know that linking people from different groups with each other, that it's not that you're alone in Franklin or in Norwood. I know, Beth, you've talked with people in Brookline, but really trying to build a statewide community, even though there's local groups, but connecting them up that we are a statewide supportive network. Beth, can you talk us through the type of work your local group leads on versus the type of work that the AMA team might take on?
Yeah, so I guess, do you mean more specifically about like tasks or goals?
Well, this was Julia's question. So, Julia, if you want to pipe in specifically if there's something that you're looking for with this, but
Yeah.
if there's, yeah.
Yeah, I think just curious, I think as folks are building out structures like this, trying to understand sort of where, Beth, you and Norwood for All really make decisions and take the lead and the responsibilities you take on versus when Joyce and the rest of the kind of central staff might step in, and sort of how you've divided it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's more of a partnership than us just being like a affiliate or a piece of abundant housing. It almost feels more like it's kind of this two-way street of we may come with, we're running into this sort of issue. We need help with this type of event. And then Joyce or someone else may help us with their expertise. But then also we will get not directives, but requests from Abundant Housing, like call your state rep about this bill, write into housing, the Department of Housing and Livable Communities, and then we share that out. So it really feels more of a partnership than like Abundant Housing sort of driving what we do necessarily, but our goals are aligned. So it's not, I don't know how much driving we need from them. Joyce came to all of our meetings for almost a year. And that was really, really helpful. Just to like keep us on task and to help us like figure out a way forward with some of our campaigns. And I miss that, but they're also 8:30 p.m. and
Oh, yeah, I think Ben for Franklin and Norwood for All had the same Thursday night at some point. It was hard. I think of a good organizer, an organizer is good when they put themselves out of a job. So I think you have taken off, both of you, in both of these groups. I don't know if this is part of what maybe part of the answer is that these local affiliates are really autonomous and decide what priorities they have. I mean, all of them, they're supportive of pro-housing and a more abundant housing, but some are going to take on projects that are not necessarily what we might do, but we support them in what they want to do. So there's autonomy there.
yeah, and I would say that the issues in Norwood or concerns from our community are really vastly different than all of the communities immediately surrounding us. We're much more middle class. Like we got into the exclusionary zoning game really late, actually. So a lot of our lot, like I live on a like I don't know, 3,000 square foot lot. So, even our needs are just very different from what is maybe a wider statewide need, where some places are saying like, please stop zoning for 50,000 square foot lots. And we're really focused on like, how do we build more like truly deeply affordable units?
Yeah, not all our groups are like that. Every group is unique, and Kobe, Ben for Franklin is more looking at transportation and looking at the holistic open space, and so Kobe can probably address that more. But I just want to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to everyone. I skipped 2 questions because of time, but this is for both of you. What, in your view, is your biggest success in the formation and operation of Ben for Franklin and Norwood for All? What are you most proud of? And what has been your biggest challenge? So 2 parts to that question. Love to hear from Kobe and then maybe Beth, and then we'll open it up to everyone else.
Yeah. Biggest success has come in a few ways. I think the main goal, we had a few different goals. We wanted to change the conversation around Franklin. We wanted to help elect leaders that shared our views. We wanted to influence policy in a variety of ways. But the biggest thing that we wanted to do was have folks that were prepared to show up to public meetings. And that has been the most successful. I'm really proud of, I think, a really clean newsletter that we put out on a regular basis, where we take all the upcoming meetings, identify the important agenda items, and provide Ben's take on those items. And those could either be projects or policy discussions. And what is led to is folks on their own time when they're available, having some talking points in hand so that they can show up to those meetings. And that's led to a whole bunch of small successes around different projects being shaped a certain way or improved upon. I'm really, really proud of the master plan. We just had a 10-year vision for Franklin, and that was with heavy input throughout that process from Ben for Franklin members, and that has shaped up really, really strongly and just got unanimous support from our planning board and our town council, which I think sets a really strong vision for Franklin. And then it was all sort of around, in Massachusetts. I know a lot of you are coming from outside Massachusetts. Yeah, we have this MBTA communities law, which says if you're served by transit, you need to zone for a certain amount of housing. And that allowed a whole bunch of communities to tackle it a bunch of ways. I was really proud that despite all the different ways that even our own administration was trying to water down Franklin's compliance, we went above and beyond. We put it in our downtown, around our transit, with more by right housing than what we needed, with lower parking mandates than what we needed, including finally eliminating parking mandates for commercial uses downtown. All of that seemed out of the question before Ben got going. So that was, a lot of successes to be proud of. The greatest challenge, I think, and you kind of alluded to it in your different parts of engagement. I think the greatest challenge has been that we're trying to organize people who want to engage at different levels. And so trying to figure out, okay, who do we want to just be like sharing fun articles with, and videos and books, and people that are heavily engaged, and we want to get them more engaged and more energized and more educated and get other people. But we also want to have those who just want to loosely follow along, jump in when they can, pay attention when they can. And so trying to figure out who are your different audiences and how do we engage them on a way that makes them feel fulfilled and gets the outcome that we desire. I think we're still getting better at it, but we started with really this large email subscriber model, and then our direct smaller email subscriber model. That has worked out well, just sort of narrowing in on two different bases and letting people jump into the more specific, opt into that when they're ready, has proven to be an effective first step at that challenge.
Thanks. And Beth, what about you and Norwood for All?
Yeah, so we've had some good outcomes, I would say, with getting funding for projects and for getting some pretty divisive votes through town meeting, or I guess what we thought would be really divisive, and just through like a lot of education, just like putting it out there. We've had a lot of success, and something that's been nice is now we're kind of a go-to of if a select board member or planning board member or a town planner is like, hey, there's this vote's coming up in front of the select board. We need some pro-housing people to show up and say something. So they'll reach out to us. It feels really good to be able to participate that way. And then, yeah, I feel like I'm a little like a step behind Kobe in a few of these things. So like I know I need to change my email, our newsletter structure. Yeah, every time I go to send out a newsletter and the software says don't send this to all of your subscribers. I'm like, but I'm going to. And anyway, yeah, but like figuring out how to target communication to people who like really want to know like the nitty-gritty details, or who just wants like a little bit of information. And then I'm almost like having an opposite problem with leadership, that I feel like at this point I've got a group of like 7 leaders, and that's a lot. So to figure out how to give people a little bit more clearly defined roles, it's really something to work on.
And you thought that there may not be anyone, and now there's 7 great leaders. And we met one at the Norwood Day and one at a workshop. So it's very exciting. Just to let people know, I don't know if we mentioned this, but Ben for Franklin stands for Building Equitable Neighborhoods for Franklin. And that name took maybe 3 or 4 meetings. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kobe. Where they're like, what are we gonna do for the name? What are we gonna do? And the logo was the same. We're gonna have the hat on the girl, and so it was very community building. It was really fun. But you had the luxury, Kobe, Ben for Franklin, of having more time. Beth, you didn't have that because your group started in December, and 2 months later was the vote for 3A. So you were like, what's our name? Quickly, let's get to it. So 2 very different situations. I'm noticing the time, and as Cheryl said, if people want to stay after 8, we'll call it at 8 o'clock. But if people want to stay late, noticing that there's a lot of questions in the chat, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl and to Mike to figure out what questions people should answer.
Perfect. Thank you, Joyce. I just want to reiterate the community norms as we enter this question and answer period. Stay on mute unless you're speaking. Use the Zoom feature, like raise your hand, speak for yourself, use I statements, listen for understanding, not response, and ask questions in the chat or message directly. So let me stop sharing. And I'm going to get started with our first question. First question we have, power mapping. Can you elaborate a little bit on that at some point? From Nicole. So I'm guessing we brought up power mapping and when we were talking about the guide. So Joyce, could you explain what that is and what that looks like?
So I will say, if you're interested more in power mapping, there is actual link in the guide that can walk you through the whole process. I'm going to defer to Julia to talk about power mapping more specifically.
Yeah, and Nicole, just if you're able to clarify, were you just did you have like a specific question or just wanting us to talk about what that is and the resources?
Yeah, just to elaborate more, like within the resources will work for me. I just heard it brought up briefly and it caught my attention. It's definitely something I want to learn more about. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just for folks who may not be familiar, power mapping is a common tool in campaigning and organizing to sort of map out who in kind of generally speaking, who in communities has power, who has influence over those, and sort of how aligned or not aligned they are on the issues that you care about. And it's a way of focusing your limited time as effectively as possible and figuring out kind of the coalition you have to build. And so the resources that are linked in the guide include sort of definitions of power mapping, or what's also called a power analysis, as well as a lot of different tools that you can use. And so, different groups might choose different tools. Some are highly visual, some are more written. But Nicole and others, if you go into that guide and click the hyperlink that links to WNN's library and a bunch of different examples, and happy to chat more about that offline.
Okay, our next question is from Keelan. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Any examples of recruiting and organizing private companies to collaborate on the issues such as raising funds for local developers or rezoning for advocates? You mentioned connecting with the Chamber of Commerce. So yeah, anybody want to take that question?
I can just say that we have not had a lot of success in this area. It might be Kobe may have a different experience, but we have connected with our local chamber, and there's a regional chamber, but I've noticed, and maybe people who've been in Massachusetts longer than I have, it kind of, I don't think that the Chamber of Commerce, like they're all very pro housing because their workers don't have to go as far. It brings in business, but it seems to have no sway on the conversation. Like I've never seen, I've never Yeah, sorry. Even when the chambers come out in favor of projects and zoning, I don't think it really moves the needle at all. And so I know that I've heard that some are like a little reticent to even publicly say stuff about it because why would they in this?
Yep, we've had luck linking up with chambers of commerce. We note that in the guide, I believe. And I think I know that Beth, there was a project that you had supported or lined up with a developer who was doing a project for that.
Oh, yeah, developers are much easier to work with because, yeah, I feel like yeah, sorry, I have a lot of like what I think other people are thinking, but I can't quite be sure. But yeah, we've had like I would say we've had minimal support from chambers like externally, I should say. Like people are very supportive of our work, but they're not gonna write a op-ed about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, less specific than working with specific private companies, although that's certainly been a goal, and we'd love to engage further. We do have a strong partnership with our downtown business advocacy group, and that's been helpful to be aligned, including getting a nice table at the downtown events.
Amazing. It looks like we have 5 minutes left. I want to get this question covered because it came up twice in 2 different ways. So it's about leadership and group structure. So how do you delegate roles to where it's equitable and equal for each member? That's one part of it. How did you decide the structure in general before you even delegate the roles? And then kind of how do you they're just interested in that role and how you connect with folks and if there's opportunities to connect with people on this call to talk about this deeper. But yeah, basically structure, how do you do it, and how do you make sure people are getting job layout? I'm sorry, I can't speak, but yes.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a clear way, if there's the ultimate way to do it. I read Joyce's resources for the best guidance. We were lucky enough through Joyce's guidance to be able to create 2 groups of people. She was big about, all right, who are going to be your core leaders who are going to run things. You're going to need to identify those people for making group decisions, right? Even if you appoint someone chair, they're not going to want to be chair unless they have some group that they can shoot some ideas off of and say that we came to some consensus in terms of what date are we going to set the event at, or what's going to be on the agenda this week. So sort of who wants to be in this inner circle group that's communicating the most regularly. And from there, the most important task is figuring out who the moderator of each day is going to be, just to make sure that someone is coming in with the planned agenda that they've communicated to people in advance, and that they're going to keep us in line with that. From there, we did the standard identifying a secretary, delegating tasks so that certain people don't have formal titles, but have roles that they know that they're best suited for. But really identifying that inner group, and then just making sure that we actually rotate the chairs and have a timeline by which we're going to continue to rotate chairs. But ensuring that you have at least one person in place is going to be the key.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, Kobe touched on this a little, but like, what are people interested in? Like, what are your strengths? What do you want to do? So, yeah, we have a like someone who's in communications does a lot of our website. Um, so I know that that's not structure in the like who's running things, but I think that to have a little bit of a structure of like who can you expect will be interested in taking on a certain type of task, and you know that they'll be good at fulfilling it. Like I thought that's been a fun part actually of running the group is like learning what other people are good at and like to do.
Amazing. We're right at the top of the hour. Um, and so I'm going to share this last slide with everyone. Everyone's like, how do I get the guide? How do I get this resource? Everybody keeps talking about this golden thing. So we're going to have you fill out our feedback survey to indicate how to get the guide. It is complimentary if you are a Welcoming Neighbors Network. It's going to be in their resource library, and we will send that to you after the meeting, along with if you are an Abundant Housing Massachusetts member. So you will receive the guide that way. If you have any additional questions or just like want to learn more, we are a resource, right? So we have our organizers, Joyce Mandel, who's on this call right now. We have also two other organizers in Massachusetts, in the Massachusetts context. We have Julia Davidowitz and Elvira Mora. And then if you live outside of Massachusetts, please contact Julia Beebe. I always think I say your name incorrectly in the last, but you can correct me. Yes, she is a great resource from Welcoming Neighbors Network. We're so excited for having you all. If you have any additional questions, please let us know. We can stay on for a couple more minutes to do those lingering questions, but other than that, this completes the workshop.
Cheryl, can I just jump in quickly and also say for folks within WNN, we had talked about it might be nice to set up a Slack channel with folks like Joyce and Cheryl who have a lot of expertise and people in the network who want to build an AMA-like model so we can be thought partners. So if you're interested, let me know. And we can also do a peer learning group on this. Thanks, Cheryl.
And did it get said that Kobe's a select board member? I think I met him at a AMA event and I thought he was a member of the select board. Is that not true in Franklin?
I'm on my town council, yeah.
Town council? That's pretty cool.
Thank you. I think so too.
Yeah. So you're elected, right?
I am elected, yeah.
Okay. That's really great that this is your issue.
I can't see anything. We have 26 people still hanging out here. So I guess we can do a couple more questions. Is that fine with everyone? I'm just going to leave this slide up a little bit longer just in case people want to get the emails. But Mike is about to put it in the chat, so we don't even have to worry about that. Amazing. Okay. Pulling up the questions. Sorry. Okay, next question is how much time does the newsletter take? Who does it? How did you define that? What platform do you use? It sounds like a very technical question, but it's needed. I can also hop in too because I do Alma's newsletter. So feel free to take that and then I'll hop in where needed.
Okay. Yeah, pick a platform. Most of them have gotten way better than the last time you used the platform. They're pretty intuitive in terms of building a website and being able to craft emails, whether they're one and the same. We use HubSpot, which does them both at the same time, but I've also used MailChimp, and they're pretty intuitive in terms of helping you design sleek newsletters and populate them and just sort of copy the same thing. I'd say find a very basic formula that you're going to do. Ours is a little blurb up top. It's the agendas of the week. It's a few resources that are interesting to us, and that's it. And that makes it really easy to populate. Okay, what are a few resources? I can throw that in. What's a little blurb about what's going on that doesn't take long? And so then the largest piece is the key meetings and agenda. Hey, feel free to follow along with Ben for Franklin. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you want an example. I think we've sort of narrowed in on something that does work, and essentially we have this grid in which you can follow along. Here's the agenda item. Here's what it is in more detail, and here's Ben's take on it. And that is just high level talking points about, some of our reactions, whether we support it, whether we don't support it, and why. That was delegated as to be my task. I'm not the chair of the group, but that's my main task, and I work closely with one other member who's a town planner in his own right. And we've been empowered, and we get a lot of feedback from our group, but we've been empowered to shape those Ben's takes so that we can be pretty nimble in putting that out. And we try not to be too controversial and or aggressive in what we're taking on. And if there's something that we're not sure about, we bring it to the group and say, hey, here's something that's coming up on an agenda item. We're thinking of taking it on, tackling it in some way. We're thinking that our binds here. What do you guys feel? But keeping it simple, having your basic thing, and then just finding a platform that makes it easy to design. And then we're just copying and pasting the same design every week and repopulating it, or every few weeks.
My my method is completely bananas. But yeah, I will just give a shout out to having a system. We actually had a really issue with Action Network and Gmail weren't getting along. So for a while I was just sending them from a Gmail account. So it was nice to be able to have like two different systems though. One was a little bit of a backup. Yeah, I've only had one person unsubscribe, so that's going to be my big claim to fame so far.
That's huge. Only one unsubscriber? Kudos, kudos. Our next question would be, and you guys answered that beautifully. I think as a communications person, you just have to try, right? Trial and error, see what happens, what people resonate with, and what people don't, right? All you can do is communicate what you're working on. That's the best thing to do. Next question is, have folks noticed a difference in what advocacy looks like in suburban communities versus small cities? I guess depending on where you advocate, like what region you are, do you have different tactics on your messaging? I know you, Beth, you did a 3A campaign, right? So like, what did that look like? Message testing, Kobe in Franklin, in your community, did you find as a town councilor, like, okay, I know these things are happening, but this will speak better to the community at large. So yeah.
Yeah, I had done a good amount of message testing just on my own and as an elected official in my community, so figuring out what works. But we were really, really intentional when we put together the first task that we gave ourselves was setting our mission and vision, and I think we rightfully toiled over that language. And if you go to our website and our mission page, you'll see pretty in-depth language, a small vision statement, a small mission, and we really built out our goals, which went beyond housing. And so we talk about transportation, economic development, community building, and are very intentional about this is not just about producing more homes, but this is about the type of community that we want to build, the way that we want to interact with each other, and that has proven to be a more effective starting place in a suburban community. We're an outer ring suburban community, not traditionally walkable, mostly single family homes. And so we couldn't come in with the same messaging as a Cambridge, and started from a much more measured marketing standpoint. And one of the other things I make a plug, because I've found them to be a very useful resource, is the Strong Towns messaging. If you're not familiar with Strong Towns, it's proven to be really effective in the suburbs, talking a lot about fiscal solvency of the community. How do we grow in a way that allows us to continue to afford the services that we all enjoy? Most suburban communities are struggling with budgeting, and so starting from there has proven to be an inroad for a lot of folks.
Yeah, so Kobe, Franklin is a city, right? Form of government?
Yeah, we're a city known as the town of. So we call ourselves Town of Franklin and Town Councilors, but we're a city form of government.
Okay. Yeah. So for folks who are outside of New England, so I'm originally from Wisconsin, so the New England form of town government was brand new to me. But there's cities and there's towns, and towns have town meetings. And Norwood is a representative town meeting, so there's 9 districts. We're a town of 30,000 roughly. There's 9 districts. When we had to do our advocacy work, it's to advocate to 300, almost 300 elected officials. So our messaging has to be really, really broad. And to be, we try to be a little more like educational than advocacy, I guess. I mean, they're one and the same, but yeah, everything is really, really framed more as just like, we know that you're busy. We need to bring this down to the busiest town meeting member who's not as involved in as maybe someone who like really cares about housing. So yeah, a lot of like small sound bites that can go out in lots and lots and lots and lots of directions. Which, yeah, is very different from when you're with a city where you just need to convince a planning board and a town council.
Amazing. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Let's see. How do you deal with external corporate housing buyers and create ways to keep homes in local hands? That may be a very detailed, explicit question, but if you could speak to that, or maybe talk about how you use your communication to really foster advocacy within the local community. I know we kind of talked about that a little bit, but like maybe expound upon that.
Yeah, it's hard. I think you're talking, we're both from smaller communities. Certainly, external corporate housing is touching every community and buying out. But we talk a lot about the merits of missing middle housing. And one of those merits is it empowers local ownership and more community developers. And we try to work with local developers and put faces behind developers to say, these types of projects, be them accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, those are built by your neighbors. If our zoning only allows for McMansions and large apartment, luxury apartment complexes, those are going to be where you start to see more corporate developers coming from outside. If we want money to stay locally, if we want to support ours, then that's just another benefit of providing these missing middle housing types.
All righty. Is there any other closing remarks you want to hear from Julia or Joyce, or I can even give Beth or Kobe, a 30-second spiel on just to wrap us up, and then we can say goodnight.
Thank you all. Thank Amma. Thanks, Joyce. Feel free to reach out to me, anyone. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me, follow along. Ben for Franklin. We're excited about what we got going in Franklin, Mass. If you ever want to come visit, happy to show you all around. If anyone's coming to Congress for New Urbanism, one of their field trips is going to be to downtown Franklin, and I'll be leading a walking tour of that. So feel free to jump in that.
Well, I hope everyone finds their own Joyce to help lead them through setting up your own a group. Yeah.
I just have loved working with both of you, and I think I'm really excited that we're releasing the guide, because I think that it can be a help to let people do this too on their own, but wanting people to know if they want to contact AMA organizers and get some support, or even just talk through where you are in the process, happy to do that if you want to reach out. And looking forward to also, please give feedback on the guide. We're open to feedback because we want to make it better. We want to make sure it's useful. So really wanting to have people give feedback so we can make it even better. And thanks, a big shout out to Cheryl. Thank you so much for emceeing tonight, and to Mike, thank you so much for being behind the scenes on this as well. And just so happy that everyone's here and from so many places outside of Massachusetts.
All right. Have a
Everyone.
good night, everyone.